This is how you style your hair with grease from under a 2016 Chevrolet Silverado 1500. Just kidding. Today, we're going to install a leveling kit on a 2016 Chevrolet 1500. To get started, you're obviously going to need to remove the wheel in order to install this 2.5 inch spacer kit for the front leveling kit. So one task that you'll have to complete is you'll need to support the vehicle from the frame with a jack stand so that you can move the control arm up and down. But in order to get the vehicle that high, you'll probably have to do a little musical jack stands. First, you'll want to start by placing the jack under the lower control arm so that you can get enough lift to get a jack stand under it. And then once you remove the tire, you'll be able to raise it high enough to put a jack stand. And once you move the jack out of this location to where you can put a jack stand under the frame rail. And I'm going to be using these 12-ton stands to put under the frame rail for extra security and because it's a long way to reach for a little tiny, what are those, 2.5-ton stands. So play a little musical jack stands, jack this up, take the wheel off, put the jack stand under it, move the jack around to the other side, raise it even higher from there, and then my jack will be out of the way to where I can put a 12-ton jack stand under the frame rail in the front right here. In front of your working area so you have a nice seat. Now the tire's out of the way, you use the jack stand, the floor jack to where it's not in the way of the jack stand we're going to put in the front. Then you remove your 2-ton jack stand so that the control arm will go all the way down, enabling you to put the new strut, elongated strut, in place. That's probably not the best shot. Key point, make sure your jack stand's in place before you start letting the jack down. First thing you want to do is disconnect your ABS harness. Use a flathead screwdriver and push this red lock tab out of the way. Then you'll be able to press the button and release the wire. Flathead screwdriver again to pry this away and to take these little clips loose. And you can just lay this to the side so that it doesn't get strained whenever you lean this assembly out. Second, you want to take the 10mm bolt loose that's holding the brake line in place to give you a little more space. And you lean the assembly out so it doesn't stretch this hose. Step 3 is going to be a 21mm wrench to disconnect the tie rod in. And you'll also need a 10mm wrench to hold the bottom of it in place because it's going to want to spin on you. Once you have the tie rod in loose, that will give you enough space to get an 18mm wrench in here to loosen your upper control arm nut. This time I'm going to loosen the CV axle so that I can push it out of the way so I can get a better grip with my wrench. Once you have the nut off the upper control arm, there's your sledgehammer. And this is a long time trick, but never try to hit threads, never try to hit the ball joint. You want to hit the area where the ball joint is pressed through. When you hit this piece here, the vibration is what's going to cause that to break free. Like so. You should be able to raise the upper control arm far enough to lay this assembly out, but as you do so, I would punch the CV axle through so that it doesn't put strain on those joints. Now you want to use your flathead screwdriver again to get these little clips that hold the wiring on top of the strut tower nuts, and you'll pry those free so that you can get a socket to the nuts up there. I'm going to start with removing the lower ones, 15mm. You can go ahead and remove these completely. The strut will just set on the lower control arm until you're ready to pull it free. At this time, while you have your 15 millimeter on here and a 15 millimeter or adjustable wrench, grab a hold of the nut at the top of the sway bar link, and then go under the bottom side with the 15 millimeter and remove the sway bar link. The lower control arm is going to drop at this point, so you'll want to support it just to make sure that none of the hoses or anything stretch whenever it does. Now we're going to go up top and take the 19 millimeter or 3/4 inch nuts off at the top of the strut tower and remove the strut assembly. For this, I'm going to use a long 1/2 inch extension, wobble extension. That's helpful because you're not going straight onto the nuts, and a 3/4 inch socket. Now that you have the strut unbolted, you should be able to lower it through the bottom in between the CV axle and the tie rod end. Be sure and collect the nuts so that you don't lose them. Now we'll move on to installing the spacer. So this kit, instead of coming with the studs already in the spacers, they're giving you these Allen heads to put in yourself for your studs, which is unusual compared to the kits like this I've installed before. Still super easy kit to install. You want to grind your factory studs down so that whenever you set your lift block on it, and this is only going to go one way, these holes are offset, so you can't put it on the wrong way, but you'll grind these factory studs down to where they're below the surface of that. And then you'll use the hardware that came in the package to secure the factory studs to the spacer, and then you'll use your factory nuts on the bolts they give you to secure the spacer to the strut bracket. Once you get your 2.5 inch spacer or whatever size leveling kit you're using mounted to your strut assembly, you'll slide it back through the bottom and get one nut started on top just to hold it in place while you work. Now that you have one nut started on top of the strut, you can leave this here while you attempt to get these lower bolts in. Now this is going to be kind of a challenge because the bushing on the bottom of this strut is already going to be in a position to where the old control arm was. So you're going to have to turn that bracket down and twist that bushing. It's not going to be easy. So I found that if you remove one of these clip-on nuts, preferably the one towards the front, that way you have more room with a screwdriver. You can stick a screwdriver down in there and pull it towards you, and it'll correct that angle a little bit where you can get the other bolt started. Once the other side's started, it's going to pull it down and mate it to where it's going to hold this one where it needs to be, and you should be able to get the other bolt in. So using a flathead screwdriver, you'll pry here and shoot that nut across the driveway. Now take your screwdriver, go in this way, and at the same time you'll have to put the bolt through and get it started. Once you have it started in the hole, 15 millimeter, preferably on an impact, we'll get it the rest of the way in there. I'll go fetch my other spring nut. Once you get your spring nut back, you'll get it started on one side. You should just be able to tap it back into place. And it'll lock in just like that. Get your other bolt started. Snug them down nice and tight, just like that. Next, we want to start getting this upper control arm reattached. More than likely you'll need to loosen where it's mounted to the frame of the truck. Don't loosen it so much as to lose the alignment marks. I understand you're going to have to get an alignment anyway after this, but you want to have it as close as it originally was factory on the trip to the alignment shop. So loosen these just enough that you can tap the top of this control arm with a hammer and get some distance out of it, because this knuckle is not going to reach with it in the position that it's in now. You'll not be able to pull it together. Now you want to place a floor jack under your control arm so as to raise the knuckle to the upper control arm. I would put the jack under the control arm and not under the knuckle, because if you put it under the knuckle, it's going to cause the whole spindle assembly to want to wobble back and forth, and it's going to be nearly impossible to line it up with the upper control arm. With those mounts loosened on top, you should be able to move the upper control arm now and hopefully not lose your alignment. As you set the spindle back up, feed your CV axle back into the hub assembly. raise the spindle and lower the upper control arm and back to its position. I want to use an Allen wrench in the tip of the upper control arm ball joint to hold that still while you tighten the nut. Don't tighten the CV axle yet, because you'll want to be able to move it back a little bit to get your Allen wrench back out there. Now that you have the nut tightened down, it should hold in place and you should be able to give it a good snug. With this attached back, you want to raise the lower control arm with the floor jack enough to bring the truck off of your jack stand to simulate the way that the truck will sit with the weight on it before you tighten your upper control arm nuts back, so that you don't wear out the bushings, forcing them into an awkward angle. With the truck still supported by the jack stand, I'm going to go to the top and tighten the nuts on the strut assembly at the top. Now that we have the nuts tightened at the top, we'll reconnect the tie rod in and put the CV axle nut back on. Whenever you attach the CV axle nut, you want to run it until it just hits the hub and stops turning, and no further than that. You don't want to damage the hub assembly. And this is a locking nut, so it just needs to be snug. Now we'll install the tie rod in. Reverse procedure, 10mm wrench and a 21mm wrench. I'm actually using a 22mm wrench. Now that it's snug, you should be able to give it a good couple cranks and get it nice and snug. Want to reattach your brake hose bracket, the 10mm bolt, and then the ABS harness. And now we'll put the wheel back on. Now we'll reinstall the sway bar link using a 15mm socket. At the bottom, and an adjustable wrench at the top. Now we'll play musical jack stands again in order to remove the 12-ton jack stand from the front and still be able to get the wheel on. So we'll start with raising the truck off the 12-ton jack stand. Move your handy dandy step stool. Place a small jack stand under the rear of the lower control arm. Making sure that it's high enough to fit whatever size tires you have. And replace the tire. Finally, we'll remove the 2.5-ton jack stand from under the lower control arm. Now that's how to install a leveling kit on your 2016 Chevy Silverado 1500. The last step is going to be to use some wire ties to tie away the wires that had been held previously by the clips on top of the bolts that hold the strut in place, because you won't have that bolt protruding anymore to hold the to put that cap on. So you want to use wire ties to secure that and make sure that it doesn't touch anything hot, moving, or sharp. Thanks for watching.
Hard right. Gotta have Jack Daniels, always. Scott's over here cutting wood. This is our makeshift fire pit. Bacon and eggs and biscuits on this here fantabulous fire.
Alright guys, be sure and hit that like button if you like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment if there's anything you'd like to see in the near future. Thanks. See ya.